Hello friends, in this class we are going to discuss the most dynamic and interesting part of the human body, that is heart. As we see, the heart is the main pumping organ of our overall body. It plays very crucial and important role inside the human body because the human body is multicellular. Whatever the human, that human is made up of a basic unit of life, that is cell. And each and every cell inside the body requires oxygen for their proper metabolism. Each and every cell requires not only oxygen but also all type of nutrients, and that nutrients are provided by a special type of fluid, that is blood. As we already study in our last class regarding the blood. The blood is a circulatory fluid which is continuously flow inside the human body, and it provides oxygen to the all basic unit of life, that is the cell. Okay, so the heart is a main pumping organ. It supplies oxygenated blood to the each and every type of cell as well as tissues. Okay, so in this class, now we are going to discuss the exact working of human heart. Means all of you know that our heart beats 72 beats per minute. Okay, and we already discussed its rhythmicity. One contraction, one relaxation is equal to 1 heartbeats. Okay, so our heartbeats are also proportional to the pulse rate. As we already feel the pulse of our hand and different type of locations, we are going to discuss that all type of points in next lecture. But in this class, now we are going to discuss the exact working and exact function of the heart. So before moving towards the working of heart, we should know some basic and interesting facts regarding the heart. Okay, so heart basically made up of a special type of muscles. That muscles are nothing but cardiac muscles. Okay, and our heart beats 72 beats per minute. Obviously, its speed sometime high, sometime low. Whenever our heartbeat increases up to 100 beats per minute, we called tachycardia. And when our heartbeat comes below 60 beats per minute, we called bradycardia. Okay, so these are the basic information regarding the heart. Our heart is myogenic, means it is having ability to create its own electrical impulses. So therefore our heart is a myogenic. So basically we know that a one heartbeat requires one contraction and one relaxations. So in this class we are going to discuss the exact working and exact mechanism, that how the functions are carried out inside the heart. It is very interesting. Okay, so see, basically we study 72 heartbeats carry out in 1 minute. So when we calculate one heartbeat, it takes place, or one heartbeat requires 0.8 seconds. Okay, so 0.8 second requires for one heartbeat. Okay, in this way we have to calculate that how the working of human heart is going on inside the heart. It is very interesting. Look at this, what exactly happened here. So when we draw a rough diagram of heart, okay, see, these are the auricles, and these auricles are open into the ventricles. Okay, so this is the left ventricle and this one is the right ventricle, right auricle, right ventricle, left auricle, left ventricle. Okay, so basically the human heart contain 4 chambers. Out of these, 2 are auricles and 2 are ventricles. Okay, so these 2 auricles are also known as receiving chambers, and these 2 ventricles are also known as distributing chambers. Why? We are going to discuss one by one point exactly. So what exactly happen inside the working of heart? It is very interesting. As we see, 70, our heart beats 72 beats per minute, and here one beat requires 0.8 second. It takes time 0.8 second. So basically we have to study that how it takes 0.8 second. Let me draw the exact calculation that how it takes time 0.8 second. So here 3 important phenomena or 3 important things are happening here. It is very interesting that we have to look one by one. The first one is atrial systole. Atrial systole. So systoles are nothing but contraction. Systoles are nothing but contraction, and diastole is nothing but relaxation. So look at this. It is very interesting. When our heart, we already discussed that our heart contains 4 chambers. Out of these, 2 auricles, when this atria or this auricle undergoes contraction, then what kind of changes are takes place inside the heart? It is very interesting. Okay, so look at here, right auricle and right auricle and left auricle. When these 2 atria undergoes contraction, it takes how much time, and what kind of changes are taking place here? It is very interesting. So look at this. It takes time 0.1 second. It takes time 0.1 second. And what kind of changes here? Some important changes are taking place here. As we know, this is the structure of human heart. It receives deoxygenated blood from overall body through superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, okay, and coronary sinus. Into which chamber? Right auricles. Okay, so whatever the deoxygenated blood is received by this right auricle, it transferred towards the right ventricle. But when this atria undergoes contraction, and what kind of changes are takes place inside the left auricle? So all of you know that our left side of our heart contain always which blood? Oxygenated blood. So here obviously there is a oxygenated blood, and we always denote this oxygenated blood by the red color. Here the oxygenated blood is present, and after atrial systole means when this atria undergoes contraction, whatever the oxygenated blood, that blood transferred towards the left ventricle. And here another point is very interesting, that these openings means right auricle open into right ventricle and left auricle open into left ventricle, and these openings are guarded by, look at this, these openings are guarded by tricuspid wall, and here left auricle open into left ventricle, and the opening is guarded by bicuspid wall, and this bicuspid wall are also known as mitral valve. Many times this question asked in examination for MCQ purpose, but you have to keep this thing in your mind that this bicuspid valve is also known as mitral valve. And listen, it is very interesting that what is the exact function of this valve? These valves are responsible to prevent the backflow of blood from ventricle to auricle, okay. So these are all things regarding the atrial systole. Okay, so what kind of changes are takes place inside the atria during the systolic condition, means when they undergoes contraction, when they undergoes contraction. Okay, so whatever the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood, this blood is transferred towards the ventricle. Okay, now this atrial systole finish and it takes time 0.1 second. Okay, so next one is ventricular systole. Okay, so many times the question will ask in examination that why it takes time, short time for the atrial systole and takes time large time for the ventricular systole. It is very interesting. So the answer is that whenever atria will undergoes contraction, it just have to transfer the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood for few distance. Okay, here few distance, but ventricle have to transfer oxygenated and deoxygenated blood towards the overall body and also lungs. So therefore here the pressure requires higher, so therefore it takes quite larger time as compared to the atrial systole. Here 0.3 seconds are required, okay, for ventricular systole, means this ventricle takes time 0.3 second for systolic conditions. Okay, so it is very interesting because we are going to discuss the human, means working of human heart, means we have to study the exact mechanism that how one heartbeat takes place. It requires 0.8 second. Out of this we already discussed 0.1 second requires for atrial systole, and here ventricular systole requires 0.3 second. So what kind of changes are taken place here is very interesting. Look at this. Here the right ventricle contains which blood? Deoxygenated blood. Which blood? Deoxygenated blood. One thing you have to keep in your mind that auricles and ventricles both are not going systolic condition simultaneously. When atria will undergoes contraction, then ventricle relax, and when ventricle undergoes contraction, then auricles become relaxed. Here it is very interesting. When atria will undergoes contraction, here the ventricle will undergoes contraction, then what kind of changes? Here whatever the deoxygenated blood in the right ventricle, it transferred towards the lungs, okay, whatever the deoxygenated blood which is present inside the right ventricle, it transferred towards the lungs through pulmonary artery, and here the backflow is prevented by semilunar valves. Here the semilunar valve is present and the backflow is prevented here, and the deoxygenated blood after contraction of ventricle, the deoxygenated blood is transferred towards the lungs. For which purpose? For oxygenation purpose, because all of you know that the lungs having large quantity of oxygen whenever we are breathing or inhaling or respirations. So the deoxygenated blood is transferring towards the lungs. For which purpose? Oxygenation purpose. And again both ventricles undergoes contraction, so we discuss regarding the right ventricle. But what about the left ventricle? As we see, the left side of the heart always contain oxygenated blood, and here whatever the oxygenated blood present inside the left ventricle, after contraction or after systolic condition, it transferred towards the overall body. Through aorta. Means whatever the oxygenated blood, it transferred towards the overall body through aorta. Okay, so after contraction, that kind of changes are taken place inside the ventricles. Okay, so what we study, after systolic condition, what kind of changes are takes place inside the atria, and inside the ventricle, what kind of changes when atria undergoes systolic condition. Okay, and it takes time 0.3 0.3 second, and it takes time 0.3 second. And the last one, when we discuss working of human heart, the last one is joint diastole. Joint diastole. Okay, so the name itself indicate the joint diastole means atria and ventricle both undergoes relaxed condition or systolic diastolic conditions. Okay, so atria and ventricle undergoes diastolic conditions means it takes time 0.4 second. 0.4 second. Okay, so there are nothing changes. Whatever the oxygenated deoxygenated blood present inside the atria, it remains as it is, and here the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood present inside the ventricle, it remain as it is. Okay, so there is nothing, some interesting changes are takes place in this phase, that is joint diastole. It takes relaxed condition. Okay, but these two conditions or these two steps plays very important role, that is atrial systole and joint diastole. Okay, so let me recall what we study in this working of human heart from beginning. Okay, so we are going to discuss the working of human heart. Here basically human heart contain 4 chambers. Out of these, 2 chambers are atria means auricle and 2 chambers are ventricles. These chambers are quite thin as compared to the ventricles because the ventricles are quite thick, and most thickest chamber from these 4 chamber is left ventricle. Why? Many times this question asked in examination of CT and NEET, that why and which chamber is the thickest chamber. So the left ventricle is quite highest thickest. Why? Because it have to provide whatever the oxygenated blood towards the overall body through aorta, because this chamber is having quite large, quite higher pressure. Okay, because it have to transfer the oxygenated blood towards the overall body. Okay, so atrial systole, when we see the atrial systole take how much time and what kind of changes are takes place inside the atria after undergoing contraction or systolic conditions. Okay, and it takes time 0.1 second. Okay, and whenever the ventricle undergoes systolic condition, it takes time 0.3 second. And also we discuss what kind of changes are takes place inside these ventricles, and also we discuss these walls are present in between atria and ventricles. So these walls plays very important role. Many times the students are not getting point that why here tricuspid wall is present and bicuspid wall is present. So let me give one trick that how you have to keep this in your mind, that see the overall blood, deoxygenated blood from overall body, this blood is received by this right auricle, and obviously from overall body the deoxygenated blood comes in this right auricle. So it takes large pressure to tolerate or to resist the large pressure. Here the tricuspid wall is present, and here the blood is coming from lungs only. So therefore it does not having that much pressure as compared to the right auricles. So therefore here the tricuspid wall is present and here the bicuspid wall is present. Okay, so when ventricle undergoes contraction, whatever the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood is present, that transfer towards the overall body as well as lungs. Okay, so that kind of changes are takes place when we see the working of human heart. Okay, so these are the basic things of the human heart. So I hope you enjoyed this lecture. The next part, that is internal structure of human heart, we are going to discuss in our next lecture. Thanks for watching this lecture. Thank you.